The bridge of the Solaris Ascendancy hummed with the desperate energy of a trapped animal. Red lights blinked incessantly on the tactical display, a sea of crimson dots encircling the Halvanar system like a tightening noose. The Dominion order had arrived in full force, their fleet a relentless tide of destruction poised to crush the Alliance's last stronghold. The air was thick with tension, tinged with the metallic bite of overheating consoles and the acrid tang of burnt circuitry. Admiral Cale Drake stood at the center of the chaos, his hands gripping the edge of the command table so hard his knuckles turned white. He was a man carved from the battles he'd fought, his face a map of lines etched by sleepless nights and impossible decisions. His gray eyes were sharp, scanning the data feeds as if sheer will could conjure a miracle. "Status report!" His voice cut through the din, sharp and commanding, though there was a faint tremor beneath it, a crack in the armor. "Shields at 42%, Admiral," shouted Lieutenant Rana from her station, her fingers dancing over the glowing interface. Sweat dripped from her temples, tracing her angular features as she tried to hold the crumbling defenses together. "The Dominion's long-range artillery is breaking through layer by layer." "And the evacuation corridors?" Drake turned to his communications officer, Ensign Jorik, whose pale face reflected the cold glow of his monitor. "2 transports made it out in the last hour," Jorik replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But, Admiral, the Dominion has deployed interceptors. Civilian losses are significant." Drake's jaw tightened. He closed his eyes for a fleeting moment, the weight of thousands of lives pressing down on him like a collapsing star. He had sworn to protect these people, to ensure the survival of the Alliance, and now the cost of his failures was measured in the silenced cries of those who wouldn't make it. The Solaris Ascendancy shook violently, throwing several officers off balance. Sparks rained from an overloaded console near the rear of the bridge, the smell of scorched insulation mingling with the underlying stench of fear. Drake steadied himself and barked, "Damage control! And get me visuals on the Dominion flagship." The main view screen flickered before resolving into an image of their executioner. The Dominion flagship, Dread Spire, loomed like a predator savoring the hunt. Its hull was blacker than the void, a leviathan adorned with jagged spires that pulsed with sickly green energy. Around it swirled a swarm of smaller warships, their sleek forms darting like schools of ravenous piranhas. "They're positioning for the final assault," Commander Lessa said, her voice cold and clinical, though her fists clenched at her sides betrayed the storm within. She had served with Drake for years, but even her unshakable resolve was showing cracks. "We don't have the firepower to hold them off." Drake turned to her, his expression grim but resolute. "Then we buy time. Every second we delay is another transport that might make it through. And if this is where we die, we make them bleed for every inch." He straightened, his presence radiating a calm authority that steadied the chaos around him. "All ships, prepare for concentrated fire on their forward line. We'll punch a hole and—" "Admiral," interrupted Jorik, his voice trembling with an odd mix of fear and something else. "We've intercepted a signal. It's not Dominion." Drake's brow furrowed. "Alliance reinforcements." "No, sir. It's from Earth." A silence fell over the bridge, the weight of that single word hanging heavy in the air. Earth. A name spoken only in whispers, the birthplace of humanity that had vanished into self-imposed isolation 2 centuries ago. To hear it now in their darkest hour felt like a cruel trick of fate. "Play it," Drake ordered, his voice a rasp. The transmission crackled through the speakers, distorted and faint, yet unmistakable in its authority. "This is Admiral Darius Holt of the United Earth Fleet. Hold your position, Solaris Ascendancy. Reinforcements inbound." The bridge erupted in murmurs, officers exchanging disbelieving glances. Drake's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Hail them back. Confirm the authenticity of that signal." Jorik's hands moved with frantic speed, his console lighting up with failed attempts. I can't. They're using an encryption protocol I've never seen before." Before Drake could respond, a distortion rippled across the view screen, a shimmer in the void that sent a chill down every spine. Then they appeared. Ships, hundreds of them, materialized from the fabric of space itself. They emerged in eerie silence, their hulls dark and angular, exuding an aura of quiet menace. Unlike the Dominion's brutish designs, these vessels were elegant and precise, their surfaces gleaming with patterns of energy that pulsed like the heartbeat of a titan. "By the stars," someone whispered. The awe was palpable. A collective breath held as the bridge crew stared at the impossible sight. The Dominion reacted immediately. Swarms of their fighters broke formation, hurtling toward the newcomers in a show of overwhelming aggression. The human fleet remained still, their silence unnerving. Then, without warning, they moved. It was like watching a predator strike. The Earth ships accelerated with a precision that defied belief, slipping through the Dominion lines as if they were dancing to a rhythm no one else could hear. Bright blue energy lanced from their weapons, tearing through Dominion shields with effortless grace. The Dominion's counterfire lit up the void, but it was as if the human ships weren't there. Their movements were too fast, too deliberate. Drake watched in stunned silence as one of the largest Dominion destroyers disintegrated under a barrage of pinpoint fire. The human fleet was surgical, dismantling the Dominion line piece by piece without a single wasted shot. "Admiral," Lessa said, her voice barely above a whisper, "they're not just fighting. They're rewriting the rules of warfare." Drake's gaze remained fixed on the screen, his mind racing. He had spent years studying Dominion tactics, searching for weaknesses in their near-impenetrable fleet. Now, in a matter of minutes, humanity had exposed vulnerabilities he hadn't even imagined. "They're not here to rescue us," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "They're here to change the game." The bridge trembled as another Dominion barrage found its mark, but no one flinched. Their eyes were on the human fleet, watching as hope materialized in the form of impossible precision and power. Drake exhaled slowly, his voice steady as he gave the next order. "Open a channel. I want to speak to Admiral Holt." The crackling response was immediate. "This is Holt. We're assuming command of the battlefield. Your forces are to hold position and focus on evacuation." Drake's lips thinned. "Admiral, I'm not one to hand over my fleet lightly. And I'm not one to waste time debating in the middle of a war," Holt replied, his voice a calm steel that brooked no argument. "Your people need a future, Drake. Let us give it to them." Drake hesitated, the weight of command pressing harder than ever. Then he nodded. "Understood, but if you fail, humanity falls with us." "We won't fail," Holt replied, a quiet certainty in his voice. "We've been preparing for this for centuries." The transmission ended, leaving Drake staring at the battlefield. The tide was shifting, but the war was far from over. And in the depths of his soul, he wondered, what kind of power had humanity been hiding in the shadows? The vacuum of space felt alive with tension as the United Earth Fleet held its eerie silence. On the Solaris Ascendancy, Admiral Cale Drake stared at the tactical display, his face bathed in its pale blue glow. The Dominion fleet continued its relentless barrage, yet the arrival of Earth's ships had shifted the battlefield in ways that defied logic. Like a ghost in the shadows, the Earth fleet moved with surgical precision, dismantling Dominion vessels with shots so exact they left gaping wounds in the enemy formation. Drake's fingers tightened around the edge of the command table, his mind wrestling with the impossible. No transmissions, no orders shared. The Earth fleet simply moved as one, an unbroken rhythm, as if it were a single entity with 1,000 hands. Every Dominion attempt to retaliate dissolved into chaos. And yet, for all their skill, Earth ships fired in controlled bursts, crippling engines and weapons but leaving the Dominion warships eerily intact. "Admiral Drake." The comm channel crackled to life, and the voice of Admiral Darius Holt came through, smooth and steady, like a blade cutting through the noise. "Redirect your firepower to Sector Theta 5. We'll open the lane. You just need to push." "Push where, Admiral?" Drake shot back, his tone sharper than intended. "Your fleet may be a miracle, but miracles don't last forever. We need an actual plan, not just theatrics." "This isn't theater," Holt replied, his voice calm, almost amused. It's strategy. Do as I say, and you'll see the plan unfold. Drake hesitated. He didn't like being led blind, but what choice did he have? The Dominion's flagship, Dread Spire, loomed in the distance like a vulture waiting to feast on their bones. The Solaris Ascendancy wasn't a ship built to question orders. It was built to survive. "Commander Lessa," Drake barked, turning toward his second-in-command. "Redirect fire to Theta 5. Target anything that moves." The bridge came alive with the sound of commands, the steady thrum of energy cannons charging, and the faint buzz of tactical officers relaying orders. Drake watched the viewscreen as his ships adjusted their formation, closing ranks to focus their firepower. A fleet barely holding together, yet still determined to fight. Beyond the Alliance fleet, the Earthships executed their assault with terrifying precision. Each vessel moved like it was dancing to a symphony only they could hear, their dark hulls absorbing starlight, leaving them almost invisible against the void. Their weapons were like scalpel cuts in the Dominion lines, severing command chains and disrupting coordination. On the Dread Spire, High Executor Tanis Velk clenched his fists as he watched the chaos unfold. The sleek, alien vessels of Earth seemed to mock him with their elegance, each movement an insult to his fleet's brutish strength. His jaw tightened, the sickly green glow of his flagship's interior casting long shadows across his angular features. "Analyze their movements," Velk barked, his voice a venomous growl. "I want to know how they're predicting us." "Executor," a subordinate stammered, sweat gleaming on his forehead. "Their formations. They don't follow any standard protocol. It's like they're adapting in real time." Velk's eyes narrowed, cold fury flickering in their depths. "Then we'll stop adapting. Deploy the Phalanx Division. Let's see how they handle brute force." In the next instant, space seemed to ripple, and a new fleet emerged from hyperspace. These were no ordinary Dominion ships. The Phalanx Division's vessels were blocky and brutal, their hulls reinforced with layers of ablative armor. Mounted on their prow were energy disruptors, weapons capable of neutralizing even the strongest shields. On the Solaris Ascendancy, Commander Lessa's voice broke through the rising tension. "Admiral, new signatures inbound. It's the Phalanx Division." Drake's heart sank. The Phalanx Division was the Dominion's hammer, a fleet designed for one purpose: to break defenses and leave nothing standing. Their disruptors could render an entire sector defenseless in minutes. "Warn Earth," Drake ordered. "They need to know what's coming." "They already know," said Jorik, his voice hushed as he pointed to the screen. The Earth fleet wasn't retreating. Instead, their ships changed formation, breaking into smaller units and weaving through the Dominion lines like phantoms. The disruptors fired, unleashing arcs of crackling energy that should have shattered shields. But the Earth ships seemed to anticipate every shot. They moved with impossible precision, each evasion so close it felt more like art than war. Holt's voice returned to the comms. "Admiral Drake, keep your ships in formation. Our drones will handle the disruptors." "Drones?" Drake muttered, but the answer came before he could demand an explanation. A swarm of smaller vessels, no larger than escape pods, poured out from the Earth ships. They moved like a swarm of angry hornets, their tiny forms glinting faintly with pulses of energy. They didn't fire traditional weapons. Instead, they latched onto the Phalanx ships like parasites, burrowing into their armor with bursts of electromagnetic pulses. Dominion disruptors faltered, their beams flickering out as power conduits were systematically severed. The bridge of the Dread Spire erupted into chaos. Tanis Velk slammed his fist onto the console, his rage spilling into every corner of the room. "What are those? How did they bypass our defenses?" "Unknown technology, Executor," a technician cried. "We can't counter them." "Then fire on their main fleet," Velk snarled. "I don't care if you hit our own ships. Erase them." On the Solaris Ascendancy, Drake watched the Dominion's desperation unfold. He felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Earth's fleet was winning, but their methods, they were unlike anything he had seen. It wasn't just technology. It was control. Every shot, every movement was calculated. Perfect. "Holt," Drake said into the comm, his voice low. "What's your endgame here?" "You're dismantling them, but you're not finishing them." Holt's reply came with a quiet intensity. "Because this isn't the endgame, Drake. This is the opening move. Before Drake could respond, the tactical display lit up with new alerts. Dominion ships from the rear line were retreating, their formation crumbling under the Earth fleet's assault. But it wasn't just a retreat. The Dominion was pulling back toward the Dread Spire, regrouping for something bigger. "Holt, they're consolidating around their flagship," Drake warned. "This isn't over." "It never is," Holt replied. "But this is where we start turning the tide. Prepare your fleet to move. When I give the signal, you'll hit them from the side." "And you?" Drake asked, his gaze fixed on the screen as the Earth ships moved into position. "We'll be the hammer," Holt said, his voice like a distant storm. "And they'll learn what it means to wake a sleeping giant." The transmission cut off, leaving Drake staring at the void where the Earth ships vanished into the chaos. The Dominion wasn't finished, and neither, it seemed, was Earth's fleet. Drake exhaled, his grip tightening on the command table. Whatever Holt was planning, it wasn't just a battle, it was a reckoning. Admiral Darius Holt's fleet disappeared into the darkness like shadows dissolving into the night. The Dominion forces, though battered, were far from defeated, their flagship Dread Spire now a rallying point for what remained of their shattered armada. The void between the opposing fleets seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own, each moment stretching thin as the two forces repositioned. But something was wrong. On the bridge of the Solaris Ascendancy, Admiral Cale Drake studied the tactical map, his eyes narrowing at the sudden lull in the Dominion's aggressive strikes. The Dominion didn't retreat, they regrouped. Drake had seen this tactic before, like predators circling their prey, waiting for the perfect moment to lunge. "They're building to something," Commander Lessa said, her tone clipped as she examined the same data. "This isn't a retreat. They're drawing us in." Drake nodded, his gut twisting with unease. "It's not just a trap," he muttered. "It's a feint. They want us to think their defense is weakening." "Admiral!" Lieutenant Rana's voice sliced through the tension like a blade. "We're detecting energy spikes from their rear lines. High levels of destabilized plasma. It's consistent with their siege platforms." Drake stiffened. Siege platforms. The Dominion's heaviest artillery, capable of bombarding entire planets from low orbit. They were notorious for their devastating power, but their weakness was always their sluggish deployment. If the Dominion had been preparing them in the shadows, it meant they had planned this confrontation well before Earth's unexpected arrival. "Patch me through to Holt," Drake barked, the rising urgency in his voice undeniable. The line crackled before Holt's calm, measured voice came through. "Drake, I assume you've noticed." "Siege platforms," Drake said bluntly. "If they deploy those, this system becomes a slaughterhouse." "They won't have time," Holt replied, his tone carrying a quiet confidence. "We're already in position to neutralize them." Drake bristled. "You've been holding that card this entire time? We're barely keeping our fleet intact while you play Phantom." Holt's voice softened, but it carried a gravity that silenced any rebuttal. "We fight wars to win them, not to survive them. Trust the strategy, Admiral. Keep your forces focused on their forward line. My team will handle the platforms." Before Drake could respond, the connection ended, leaving him staring at the fading comms display. He slammed a fist onto the table, his frustration boiling over. The Earth fleet's methods were impeccable, but their secrecy grated on him. For all their power, they were as much a mystery as the Dominion's dark motives. The Solaris Ascendancy trembled as another barrage rocked the ship. Sparks erupted from an overloaded console, filling the air with the sharp tang of burning circuits. Drake steadied himself, barking orders to regroup the fleet's formation. Outside the viewport, the Dominion forces continued their measured retreat toward the Dread Spire, their hulking flagship radiating menace like a collapsing star. The lull was broken by the sudden arrival of Holt's next move. It began as a faint shimmer at the edge of the Dominion rear lines, a distortion in space that expanded into a violent ripple. From the rift emerged Earth's spectral division, a fleet of smaller, highly specialized ships designed for infiltration and sabotage. Their arrival was as silent as death, their dark hulls blending seamlessly into the void. Each ship emitted faint, eerie pulses of light like fireflies in a midnight forest. The Dominion reacted instantly, deploying their reserve fighters to intercept. The resulting clash was a chaotic storm of streaking energy bolts and shattering hulls, but the Earthships moved with uncanny precision, slipping through the Dominion defenses as if they were water carving through stone. On board the Dread Spire, High Executor Tanis Velk snarled as his tactical display lit up with warnings. His subordinates scrambled, their voices a discordant symphony of panic and orders. Velk's angular face twisted with fury as he bellowed, "Cut off their reinforcements! I don't care what it takes. Hold the siege platforms!" The Earth Fleet's assault on the siege platforms wasn't brute force, it was meticulous. Each platform was targeted at its critical joints, their massive plasma arrays disabled before they could fire. The spectral division moved like predators dismantling prey, their strikes precise and devastating. From the bridge of the Solaris Ascendancy, Drake watched the unfolding carnage with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The Earth Fleet's tactics were brilliant, but they were also terrifying. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like machines, every move calculated to the millisecond. "Admiral," Commander Lessa said, her voice quieter now, "they're not just winning. They're dismantling the Dominion piece by piece." Drake nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the viewscreen. "But why leave their ships intact?" he murmured. "They could destroy them, end this faster. So why hold back?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Earth's fleet wasn't here to win a battle. They were playing a longer game, one that Drake couldn't yet see. The Dominion, however, wasn't finished. As their siege platforms fell, Velk's flagship, Dread Spire, unleashed its final card, a concentrated energy surge that radiated outward in a shockwave. The wave didn't target ships directly. Instead, it disrupted their systems, leaving even Earth's advanced vessels momentarily vulnerable. On board the Aegis Eternum, Holt gripped the armrest of his command chair as the lights flickered. His chief strategist, Commander Malik Vorn, leaned over the tactical display, his sharp eyes scanning for patterns. "Adaptive wave disruptors," Vorn said, his tone clipped. "They're trying to blind us." Holt's lips curved into a faint smile. "Let them try. Deploy the drones." The command triggered a new phase of Earth's counterattack. From the shadows of the spectral division, swarms of unmanned drones erupted like a hive of angry wasps. They moved with chaotic precision, scattering in unpredictable patterns that overwhelmed Dominion targeting systems. Each drone carried a payload of concentrated EMP bursts, targeting the Dominion's command relays and rendering them useless. The drones weren't just weapons. They were a message. Earth wasn't just ahead technologically. They were rewriting the rules of engagement. On the Solaris Ascendancy, Drake watched as the Dominion fleet faltered. Their movements grew sluggish, their once precise formations devolving into disarray. Yet the Earth fleet remained relentless, their strikes methodical and unyielding. "Admiral," Rana said, her voice shaking, "the Dominion is pulling their forces back toward the Dread Spire. They're protecting something." Drake's heart sank. He turned to Lessa. "What do we know about the Dread Spire's capabilities?" "Not enough," she admitted, her brow furrowed. "But if they're consolidating, it's because they have something they think can still turn this battle." Drake exhaled sharply, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Whatever the Dominion was planning, it would be devastating. And whatever Earth was hiding, it was just as dangerous. Holt's voice crackled over the comms again, this time colder, sharper. "Admiral Drake, prepare your fleet to move. When I give the signal, we'll strike together." "Strike where?" Drake demanded. Holt's response was a single, chilling sentence. "The heart of the Dread Spire." The line went dead, leaving Drake staring at the void ahead. The Dominion was cornered, but cornered predators were always the most dangerous. And in the silence, he couldn't help but wonder, what price would they pay for this victory? Admiral Cale Drake stood on the bridge of the Solaris Ascendancy, the pale light of the tactical display casting sharp shadows across his weathered features. The Dominion's flagship, Dread Spire, loomed in the distance, its spires radiating pulses of green energy that rippled like the heartbeat of a giant beast. Around it, the remnants of the Dominion fleet clung to a fragile formation, their desperation palpable in their erratic movements. Drake's voice was low and steady as he addressed his officers. They're protecting something. Whatever's inside the Dread Spire is their last gambit. If we hit it head-on, we're walking into their trap. Commander Lessa nodded, her sharp eyes fixed on the display. They've concentrated their firepower here and here, she said, gesturing to the choke points, where Dominion vessels were packed tight. It's a kill zone. Anything entering that sector will be vaporized. They're forcing us to attack where they want us, Drake murmured. Unless... His gaze shifted to the Earth fleet's position, a constellation of shadows just beyond the Dominion's sensor range. Open a channel to Holt, he ordered. I have a plan. The comm crackled, and Admiral Darius Holt's voice filled the bridge, cool and composed. Drake, what's your proposal? Drake straightened, his tone measured but urgent. We don't hit the Dread Spire directly. We create a diversion at their flanks, draw their fire, force them to split their defenses. While they're distracted, your fleet penetrates their core defenses. Holt's pause was brief, but in it, Drake sensed a flicker of approval. A two-pronged assault, risky but effective, if executed with precision. Drake leaned forward, his gray eyes sharp. We'll make it precise. Holt's voice held a hint of steel. Then synchronize your fleet. My ships will strike when the window opens, but don't get caught in the crossfire. The line went dead, and Drake turned to his officers. You heard the man. Prepare all ships for coordinated strikes. This isn't about raw power. It's about timing. The bridge erupted into motion as commands flew across the room. Tactical officers synchronized targeting systems, engineers calibrated weapons, and communications relayed orders to every Alliance vessel. The air buzzed with tension and purpose, the scent of overheated electronics mingling with the sweat of the crew. Outside the viewport, the Dominion's defenses bristled with activity, their warships shifting to reinforce weak points. The Dread Spire's spires pulsed brighter, a sickly green light casting long shadows across the battlefield. It was a fortress, its presence both awe-inspiring and oppressive, a reminder of the Dominion's brutal might. In the heart of the Dread Spire, High Executor Tanis Velk stood amidst the controlled chaos of his bridge. The green glow bathed his gaunt face as he barked orders, his voice a whip cracking through the tension. Reinforce the forward line, and someone explain why their fleet hasn't been obliterated yet, a junior officer stammered, his eyes darting across his console. Their movements are erratic, Executor. They're creating multiple weak points, but none seem to be genuine. Velk's lip curled. They're baiting us. He leaned over the tactical display, his eyes narrowing at the Earth fleet's shadowy presence. And the humans? What are they doing? They're repositioning, the officer said hesitantly. But their exact movements are unclear. Velk's eyes flashed with anger. Unclear? Then make them clear. I will not be outmaneuvered by shadows. Back aboard the Solaris Ascendancy, Drake's fleet surged forward, splitting into two distinct formations. The first pressed hard against the Dominion's left flank, battering their defenses with relentless volleys. The second remained just outside the Dominion's firing range, a phantom force poised to strike. Drake's voice cut through the comms. Hold steady. Don't overcommit. We're not here to win, just to distract. The Dominion fleet scrambled to respond, their warships moving to intercept. For every ship they repositioned, a gap emerged elsewhere in their formation, and Drake exploited each one with surgical precision. It wasn't about overwhelming firepower, it was about creating chaos. Meanwhile, Holt's fleet began its approach. The Earth ships moved like predators stalking prey, their dark hulls absorbing the faint starlight. Each ship emitted a low hum, a subtle vibration that resonated through the void like the breath of some ancient beast. Inside the Aegis Eternum, Holt watched the battlefield unfold, his hands clasped behind his back. His chief strategist, Commander Malik Vorn, stood beside him, his sharp features illuminated by the tactical display. The Dominion's tightening their perimeter, Vorn observed. If we wait much longer, they'll close the gaps. They won't have the chance, Holt replied. Signal the fleet. Phase 2 begins now. The Earth ships sprang into action. They moved as one, a synchronized force that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Their sleek forms slipped through the Dominion's outer defenses, targeting command ships and severing lines of communication. Each strike was precise, designed to disorient rather than destroy. On the Dread Spire, alarms blared as Velk's bridge descended into chaos. Officers shouted over each other, their voices tinged with panic. "Executor! The humans have breached the perimeter!" Velk's fists clenched. "Redirect all firepower to the core. Do not let them reach the spires." But it was too late. The Earth fleet had penetrated deep into the Dominion's defenses, their weapons carving through armor like molten blades. One by one, the spires began to falter, their green glow dimming as energy conduits were severed. Drake watched from a distance, his chest tightening as the Dread Spire began to crumble. The Dominion's flagship had been their symbol of invincibility, and now it was falling. "Admiral," Commander Lessa said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The Dominion's breaking. Their formation is collapsing." Drake nodded, his gaze fixed on the screen. "Signal all ships. Press the attack. This is our chance." The Alliance fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing as they tore through the remnants of the Dominion's forces. But even as victory seemed within reach, Drake couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at him. "They're retreating too quickly," he muttered. "It's not like them." His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden surge of energy from the Dread Spire. The spires flared one final time, their green light turning white-hot as a massive shockwave rippled outward. The Solaris Ascendancy trembled violently, and Drake braced himself against the command table. "Admiral!" Lieutenant Rana shouted. "The Dread Spire! It's self-destructing!" Drake's heart sank. The Dominion hadn't just lost, they were taking everything with them. "Halt!" Drake shouted into the comm. "Pull back, it's a trap!" But before he could say more, the shockwave engulfed the battlefield, a blinding light swallowing everything in its path. Drake's world went white, and for a moment he thought it was the end. And then, through the chaos, came Holt's voice, calm and unyielding. "We anticipated this." As the light faded, Drake's vision cleared to reveal the Earth fleet, untouched. Around them, shimmering barriers pulsed faintly before dissolving. "They used their own desperation against them," Drake murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. Whatever Holt was planning next, it would be decisive. But at what cost? The aftermath of the Dread Spire's self-destruction rippled through the void like a collapsing star, scattering fragments of the Dominion fleet across the battlefield. On the Solaris Ascendancy, Admiral Cale Drake stood motionless, his gaze locked on the display. What he saw filled him with equal parts awe and dread. The Earth fleet remained untouched and unyielding, their shimmering barriers dissolving into the darkness, as if the Dominion's final act of defiance had been nothing more than a ripple in a pond. "We anticipated this." Holt's words echoed in Drake's mind. There was no arrogance in the statement, only certainty. It was the kind of confidence that came from years, centuries of preparation. Drake's fists clenched. Humanity had been hiding more than power. They had been hiding inevitability. On the comm, Holt's voice returned, cool and controlled. "Admiral Drake, the Dominion's main fleet is neutralized. Their remaining forces are scattered and disorganized. It's time to end this." Drake's voice was edged with tension. "End this how, Holt? We've dismantled their fleet, taken their stronghold, and left them defenseless. What's left to end?" Holt's silence stretched for a moment too long, and when he finally spoke, it carried the weight of something irreversible. "The Dominion's leadership remains entrenched on their command world. Their infrastructure and command chain are intact. As long as they exist, they'll rebuild. You know this as well as I do." Drake's gut twisted. "You're talking about a full-scale invasion. Do you realize how many lives that will cost? Civilians? Soldiers?" "No!" Holt's voice sharpened, cutting through Drake's protests. "We're not sending soldiers. We're sending a message." Before Drake could press further, Holt's fleet began to move. The dark ships that had danced through the battlefield now converged into a unified formation, their sleek hulls aglow with faint blue patterns that pulsed like veins carrying lifeblood. The sight was haunting, their silence more unnerving than the chaos of battle. "Admiral," Commander Lessa said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what are they doing?" Drake shook his head, his throat dry. "I don't know." But I think we're about to find out. The tactical display shifted, zooming out to reveal the Dominion's home system. The command world, Varanth, hung in the center like a jewel in a crown of planetary defenses. Even with their fleet in ruins, the Dominion's planetary systems bristled with weaponry, a final bastion of their imperial might. Holt's voice came through the comm, steady and resolute. "Drake, I suggest you hold your fleet back. What happens next is not for your eyes." Drake's chest tightened. "You don't get to make that call, Holt. If you're about to do something catastrophic, we need to know." There was no reply, only silence. Then, like a single ripple breaking the stillness, the Earth fleet opened fire. It wasn't the rapid, precise volleys of earlier battles. This was something entirely different. Beams of golden light erupted from the Earth ships, each one streaking across the void and converging on Varanth. The light wasn't destructive in the conventional sense. There were no explosions, no debris flung into space. Instead, the energy cascaded over the planet's surface, enveloping it in a blinding radiance that seemed to burn away the very fabric of its existence. On the Solaris Ascendancy, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the Dominion's last bastion was consumed by the light. The planet itself seemed to shudder, its surface fracturing like a frozen lake under unbearable weight. The weapons arrays orbiting it flickered and died, their power drained in an instant. Drake's voice was low, almost hoarse. "Holt, what are you doing?" Holt's response came softly, yet it carried the weight of judgment. "Ensuring they can never rise again. Their weapons, their infrastructure, their command, all of it, neutralized at the quantum level. The Dominion won't just lose this war. They'll lose their capacity to wage another." Drake's breath caught. "You're erasing them." "No," Holt said firmly. "We're removing their ability to harm others. The people of Varanth will survive, but their empire ends today." As the golden light faded, Varanth remained, but it was changed. The planet's surface was darkened, its spires of war factories and military outposts reduced to lifeless husks. It was as if the Dominion's war machine had been surgically removed, leaving only silence in its wake. For a long moment there was no sound on the Solaris Ascendancy. The bridge crew stared at the display, the weight of what they had just witnessed pressing down on them like a physical force. Then Commander Lessa spoke, her voice laced with awe and unease. "They didn't destroy the planet. They dismantled it." Drake exhaled slowly, his shoulders heavy. "They didn't need to destroy it. They've made their point." The comm crackled again, and this time Holt's voice carried a note of finality. "The Dominion is finished. Their fleets are scattered, their infrastructure dismantled, and their leadership powerless. This war is over." Drake's jaw tightened. "And what happens now, Holt? What happens when the galaxy sees what you're capable of? What stops them from fearing you just as much as they feared the Dominion?" There was a pause, and then Holt's reply came, quieter, but no less resolute. "Fear isn't our goal, Drake. Balance is. For centuries, we prepared not to conquer, but to ensure no one else could. We've spent too long in the shadows. Now the galaxy must know. We're here to protect it." Drake's voice softened, though his doubt lingered. "And if they don't trust you?" "They don't have to trust us," Holt said. "They just have to understand that the days of unchecked tyranny are over." The transmission ended, leaving Drake staring at the tactical display as the Earth fleet began to withdraw. For all their power, they moved without triumph, their precision a testament to their singular purpose. There was no celebration, no cries of victory, only the quiet efficiency of a force that had done what it came to do. In the days that followed, the galaxy was left reeling. The Dominion's fall sent shockwaves through every corner of known space. Alliances shifted, borders were redrawn, and the fear that had gripped so many civilizations began to give way to cautious hope. But with that hope came uncertainty. Earth had revealed itself not as a conqueror, but as a force of reckoning, and in doing so, they had redefined what it meant to hold power. On the Solaris Ascendancy, Drake stood alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. He thought of the lives saved, the battles fought, and the impossible force that had turned the tide. Earth's fleet had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Behind him, Commander Lessa approached, her voice soft. "What now, Admiral?" Drake didn't turn, his gaze fixed on the void. "Now we rebuild, and we hope we never have to see them fight like that again." The stars outside seemed brighter, but they carried a weight of finality. Humanity had arrived on the battlefield, and for the Dominion, and perhaps for the galaxy itself, it truly was game over.